What exactly is cultural appropriation? According to the initial definition upon a simple Google search, cultural appropriation is defined as the act of using things from a culture that is not your own, especially without showing that you understand or respect the culture. This is followed by a similar Wikipedia entry, which defines it as the inappropriate or unacknowledged adoption of an element or elements of one culture or identity by members of another culture or identity. Thanks to the invention of the internet, experiences from all walks of life and global information are shared to the masses. African American culture, through the wonderful social sharing abilities of, well, social media, has been commonly appropriated via trend culture. As our style, habits, and expressions are destigmatized through our mediums, such as our music, arts, media representation, and other cultural performances, it has garnered interest from those of other cultures. Though it is appropriated in other places around the world, it is most prominent in America, where particularly its colonial residents feel a sense of entitlement to our experiences with the backing of constitutional freedoms to exercise their privilege. They often downplay the cultural significance of our hairstyles, which are indigenous to our African descent, and developments resulting from post-enslavement, such as AAVE. Our cultural beliefs and meanings to our hairstyles are washed out when we are met with protests from non-colored people, demeaning it to just a hairstyle, so anyone should be able to wear it. If it's just a hairstyle to you, you shouldn't be wearing it. It perpetuates a self-fulfilling intention in your personal exploitation of our culture. When it comes to AAVE, I've experienced it being so diluted by trend culture, some people generally didn't know it was AAVE. Some young white male once told me that period was not AAVE, but a word by gay people. As a member of the Alphabet Mafia myself, I was bamboozled by this claim, especially since it came from another member of said mafia. It was said so much in those spaces that it was misunderstood in origin. I thought it was a result of the Black trans pioneers of pride in the community that founded a significant amount of the culture, but please cite your own research for a further understanding of this. Words such as John were generalized as an East Coast thing, when it originated in the tri-state area via the growing African American ethnic groups' usage of the vocabulary, starting in New York. Though this generalization gradually became a growing issue as this and other words were used in various forms of media and communication, in which others began to replicate. It was just a little awkward, but not reprimandable, though it grew into more as its trendiness incited people to make the language their entire personalities. These are just the few examples that I will continue to build on further throughout this video. Greenheart International, an organization which seeks to transform the world through the facilitation of cultural exchange programs, volunteer services, and environmental advocacy projects, takes an initiative with their own article on the subject. They quote, "Appreciation is when someone seeks to understand and learn about another culture in an effort to broaden their perspectives and connect with others cross-culturally. Appropriation, on the other hand, is simply taking one aspect of a culture that is not your own and using it for your own personal interests." This article then goes on to provide steps for proper understanding, the first being to examine your own culture. Through self-reflection, you will be better able to understand differences and determine what is important in cultures around the world. If you realize that a specific aspect of your own cultural background is essential to your identity and it would offend you if someone were to use it without fully understanding what it means, consider that people all over the world in cultures other than your own may feel exactly the same way. End quote. For any non-colored Americans who are unable to relate, think of it as a religion. Though more makeshift in relation, it is something generally shared universally. I will be elaborating on the subject of appropriation versus appreciation via the examples I've spoken of at the start of this video essay, hairstyles and AAVE. Any expanding topics that require extended explanation in the roles they play in the topic will be cited and will include redirections to learn more in detail from either more experienced advocates or encourage personal research. The extra education should be learned if you care, but I'm willing to make short, expansive videos if requested. Starting with box braids. In traditional African cultures, hair braiding was used to help differentiate tribes and their locations. Braid styles also symbolize wealth and power, with the belief that a woman's ability to afford the time and cost of them was telling of their prosperity. Braids were also used for communication, the patterns carrying messages or mappings. These played a major role during slavery in the form of box braids alongside cornrows. Cornrows were commonly adorning the heads of West Africans, serving as identifiers of the wearer's age, kin, marital status, religion, and sometimes also wealth. In the progression of slavery, they were used to symbolize resistance and served as secretive communication alongside the use of box braids. These braids were also known to carry rice seeds along a slave's journey throughout escape and the enslavement prior. And finally, locks, believed to trap one's power within themselves through the spirituality of hair. They connected one to their heritage, expressed individuality, and symbolized social status. They served as signs of political resistance, alongside cornrows, and rose in prominence once more in the usage of Jamaican rastas. Spiritually, the locking of the tight curl patterns kept one's spirit from being leached or draining while protecting a strong connection to one's ancestors. The term dread that prefixes the locks to this day originates from an insult labeled by European colonizers in response to the sense of dread the African warriors that adorned them would invoke within them. It was also to degrade how they appeared to them, which is why the growing knowledge of this has led some African Americans to move away from the very term of dreadlocks in a form of rebellion to the colonization of their culture. Now, what does hairstyle appropriation versus its appreciation look like? These three hairstyles are the most well known and are being appropriated and worn by others outside their race. We've all seen the images and TikToks and excuses and screaming about why black people shouldn't be allowed to lay claim to a hairstyle. We've all seen white people wear it, in spite of the warnings of the inevitable hair damage they face from a protective hairstyle for a particular hair type. I'll tackle the differences of the appropriation and appreciation of our black hairstyles via a conversation involving the fact that this is one of the topics in which black people are tokenized the most. A black hairstylist has given white people braids. My black friends encouraged me and or has done box braids for me. You can't own a hairstyle. Culture is meant to be shared. From shortest to longest answers, I'll address these possible rebuttals. Firstly, if you refer to my black friends in a situation where you're defending your own actions from other black people, you are therefore tokenizing them, and that immediately capsizes your intentions as self-serving. Secondly, it's quite hysterical how culture is meant to be shared is brought up when it's most beneficial. First, African Americans were uncivilized and therefore should be colonized, converted, and treated uncivil. Then we are called ghetto and criminals as a result of our language, upbringings, bad eggs who are victims of a rigged system, etc. And now that our media is trendy and less stigmatized, we should be open to sharing, specifically because you guys want to use it, and you don't even want to take the time to understand, be culturally introduced, or even be interested in anything internal about our culture, since you just want the cute and cool external. And moving on to thirdly, no, we can't own a hairstyle. Black people do not say we own locks, and we know other cultures do so. But the Viking example is matted hair that was flea-ridden, but still had cultural significance to the combat of their people. South Asians also were known to have locks, but their locks also have spiritual and cultural significance to them. Regardless of the backing, locks are still culturally significant to various groups of people, specifically in the South. So downplaying them to just a hairstyle, to sum it up to an ownership, again slaps your intentions into that of a self-fulfillment, since you're negating its importance to support an entitlement to do as you please. It is also an American and post-colonial idea to refer to ownership in most social scenarios. But in alignment to these ideologies, it is correct that we cannot make, force, or physically retaliate to your choices. So what you're fighting for is the fact that you don't like that we utilize our freedoms of speech and choice in return to not support your choices through speaking up about it and through disassociation from you. We can't stop you from saying the N-word, but what you're upset about is that you can be condemned socially for it. Another thing you can't control, because it is clear morally why these things are condemned. The last two rebuttals I had quoted can be summed up with what is now on the line of appropriation versus appreciation, context and intention, as of any generally invasive action. A white person from South Africa or Jamaica who grew up with the culture from the actual inside of black spaces would not garner the same negativity, if any, when practiced the native cultures and beliefs such as hairstyles. Now, Being introduced to the hairstyle culture via the support of a Black hairstylist and the guidance of Black friends can serve as a starting point for an intention and mindset shift away from the exploitative nature of appropriation. Alongside the education and understanding of the hairstyles with these guides would be a path of appreciation. These white hairstylists that we see on TikTok, TikTok Lives, and YouTube make fake locks, on the other hand, who sell them to anyone or do them for others in a makeshift way to overstep and appropriate significantly. They make money over the self-fulfilling nature of themselves and others by literally exploiting our culture, selling majorly to those who would probably go to them due to their inability to acquire locks independently. Things like cyber locks and fantasy locks play close in relation to our hairstyles, but cyber locks are just shimmery noodles and technically just reminiscent of the general structure of locking hair. And finally, a white American just waking up one day and thinking the hairstyle is just cute and cool and thinking that's enough to get them the privilege to slap them on their head is very much appropriating and is what is commonly called out. Short for African American Vernacular English, AAVE is a variation of the English dialect that evolved into a specialized form of communicative dialect spoken by African American people. It is also sometimes referred to as Ebonics. For further detail on the features of the language, EnglishSpanish.com has the list of the 5 language features headlining their individual explanations. AAVE developed as a form of recovery from the NATO alienation inflicted on us by our colonizers and its overarching traumas. It took parts of various communicative experiences to form connections between the African American people who are separated from their home languages and are lacking in education of the English languages. Tutanese, a language developed by enslaved African American peoples 250 years ago to communicate in secret, is a form of AAVE. It applies West African dialect rules to an English dialect foundation and developed to an innate unique dialect to African Americans over time, even branching out into unique regional variations as we grew in culture. According to studying linguist Hip Hoperagai on YouTube, doubling in AAVE has origins in Yoruba culture, where certain adjectives are doubled to express an emphasis on an expression. Ruben saying dada to express that something is very good can be reminiscent of the way we say lately or for real. Summer Cho, who can also be found on YouTube, elaborates on this by expanding its origin to the very region of West African dialect practices, and even explains the usage as epizygous. For more explanation, he has a short called Epizygous, Why We Double Up Our Words in AAVE. Now, what does AAVE appropriation versus appreciation look like? In the video, AAVE is not internet culture by the Griot on YouTube. They define AAVE in detail as a dialect and its defamation in being referenced to as a black scent. Via the internet, our language is diluted away from us and downplayed first to being ghetto or vulgar, then generalized as internet culture when it's conveniently trendy in its usage. It erases its relevance to us, an erasure that solely benefits those wanting to lay claim to the right to use what they find attractive about our culture, that being our dialect in this case. If a sense of understanding is still lacking, please cite further research on your own. Listen to other voices, experiences, and perspectives on what the line is, or get a feel by listening to both extremes. Caring enough to take the time for yourself to understand how my people feel is only the first step in true appreciation, and I'm sure other groups of POC people would appreciate that approach as well. You can learn from how other cultures of POC experience and perceive appropriation. Instead of complaining about them having something to say about appropriating all the time or gatekeeping, ask them what appreciation looks like to them. If you truly have good intentions behind your desires to share our cultures, ask what you can do to express appreciation to their culture by partaking in the action you would like. If you are met with some sternness, we are human, and the majority of responders are not innately aggressive. Someone will definitely explain if you express the sincerity required to truly have the openness for other cultures. My commentary should just be one of the various sources you listen to in regards to the voices of people of color. My video should not be the main source for perspective or education on this topic. And though you will be listening to others' perspectives, it is also not their job to educate you on what you want to do with our culture. So please be responsible in reaching out to properly understand if you truly appreciate us.